Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling Dev Tools. I'm joined today by Thomas, the founder of Raycast. Today we get into the origin story of Raycast, which is a tool that I use every day, many times a day. We also talk about brand and quality and what it means to have high quality. We also talk about AI, but honestly, it's not just cliche, it's just genuinely very cool. Raycast is basically trying to be what Apple Intelligence should be, but so far isn't even out yet, as far as I know. It's a very fun episode. Enjoy. I actually don't think I've properly heard the story of how you started, why you started Raycast.
Yeah, should I tell?
Yeah, I want to hear.
Let's do it. So going back in time a bit, that was basically 2020 was when Raycast started. And really looking back, I think there were a few things that sort of came together. So Peter, my co-founder, and I, always productivity nerds, essentially. And we're always looking, how do you get the milliseconds of improvement out there, which I think a lot of developers do, to be fair. And a few trends that we noticed, like one, over our career, we felt like we had to use more and more tools outside of our IDE. And when you compare them to an IDE, they were not great, to say the least. They were kind of like slow. They didn't have keyboard navigation. They just felt like I go out of my IDE and things become not nice to use anymore from a developer standpoint. And in the space of like IDEs, we had always sort of our command palette, right? And Sublime was there, like VS Code made it even popular. But then it started going outside of IDEs as well, and apps like Superhuman or Linear kind of in 2020 picked up that pattern where you can press Command K and search for stuff to do. And so the keyboard shortcut suddenly became the thing where power users wanted to have that. And so we had those two things that we felt like really interested around. And then we also were always tinkering around, like building little scripts and little tools for our work and making that better. And I think every developer has a bunch of shell scripts, right, that they usually have to make them more productive. And we felt like, it's a shame that those things just like live in a terminal. They're not so accessible. The terminal is very limited. You can't render images really easily. And they're very technical, right? And so we've combined all of that and said like, hey, look, wouldn't it be cool if you have one global interface, which is a command palette, that you can activate anywhere you are? It's connected to all the tools you have, super keyboard driven, super fast, ergonomic. And so that sort of was the initial idea of Raycast. And it was meant to be early on already like a drop-in replacement for macOS Spotlight, because we felt like the interface is kind of there, but it's not powerful enough for developers or other technical professionals. And so we thought about, you're really going to use just one of those interfaces. And so how can we be sort of a drop-in replacement for the de facto default and on a Mac, but make it 10 times better? And so that was sort of the initial idea 5 years ago. And so a lot has happened since then, but that's sort of how it started back then. And that's also, I mean, we went then into Y Combinator essentially with this idea and Winter 2020 batch, which was also a fun story.
Yeah. You
Can't stop here now.
Yeah.
So beaming back into 2020, we basically joined YC January 2020. And then...
Were there any other dev tools in your batch, by the way?
Yeah, there were. In our batch, Fly.io.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were there. Post hoc.
No way.
Which haven't started at post hoc. I think they started to do post hoc kind of work in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the batch. So they were like pivoting really rapidly at the end, very successfully. We're using them now, which is very cool. There was another one, Replicate, like the AI stuff.
Dude, that's a vintage batch.
It is quite a good batch now thinking about it. So it was quite fun. And so, we basically joined there, and it was 3 months. Peter and I went to San Francisco, Mountain View, rented an apartment, and basically 24/7 just did Raycast for 3 months straight before the pandemic hit, and gave a really quick shutdown because it was like, the batch was in person, right? So you're going there for 3 months, you have weekly office hours, and like trying to make progress every week and like pushing basically how much you can do in a week. And you're working towards this goal of like a demo day, going in front of investors and pitching your startup idea in roughly 2 minutes. So super condensed and try basically to say like why you're going to be the next unicorn in a way. And what was very different for us is like we were basically working towards there, and then I think a week before demo day, COVID popped up out of nowhere, right? And the initial reaction was like, okay, cool, there's this virus, let's maybe bring some hand sanitizer and like call it a day, right? It would still happen. And then a day later it's like, yeah, we changed our minds, we can't do it in person, but what we're going to do is a very professional video where you can pitch, and then all the investors going to get this video. That didn't happen. A day later was like, look, we can't make this happen. Can you give us a single slide with 5 bullet points? All the investors get that. And then a day later it was like, by the way, if you're an international founder, you should really get out of here because the board is going to shut down. And so we were hopping on a plane. Like, I think this was literally booked the plane not even 24 hours later. And then we were flying back to London where both of us lived. And I think when we landed here, the sort of demo day started. And then the world was very different from there on. Everything was in lockdown. This basically hasn't existed there. When we talked to investors, they didn't know Zoom. They usually would go with them drinking a coffee, meeting in person. And so for us, it took then a time like getting our seed round together, which we ended up doing with Excel. And we haven't met our initial partner for, I think, almost a year because everything was under lockdown. And so from there on, things got very different. But yeah, that was sort of our first 3 months of the company.
Wow. What were the first features that Raycast had?
Yeah. So first features were like sort of the classics, searching for apps, searching for files. I remember I hacked clipboard history on our flight to YC.
Really?
Yeah. So I hacked this in there. I remember also we discussed features in there that we haven't built until now, which is sort of a bit of a running gag when we flew to San Francisco. But yeah, so those were the first early ones. The thing that really made the change, like we were at some point, is like, look, this is cool, but can this be a big company? Like, it's like all a bit utilitarian. And then so what we did starting to do, we talked to YC alumni. And so these are basically former founders that joined other companies, and a lot of them are engineers. And so we looked in the internal forum of YC, who are engineers working at like companies like Airbnb, Lyft, whatever. And the cool thing about YC is really like easy to get in touch with those people. You ping them an email and they usually come back because they've been in the same situation.
Yeah.
So you're kind of helping each other out. So we hopped on a call with them and asked like, hey, how do you work? What kind of stuff do you do there? What are things that we could improve? And sort of this one pattern that reoccurred was like everybody was using Jira at their work, right? This is like sort of how you track work, but nobody was really happy with it. They were feeling like it's a bit slow. They want to have it a bit more modern. And then we were like, okay, look, can we like build an extension for this? Like just a better experience for Jira essentially. And so that was our very first extension, which we built ourselves. There was no API, nothing. We just basically started building this extension and really tried to make the experience better. So we wanted to allow you to create an issue really quick. And we wanted to allow you to see your own issues and modify them and maybe copy a link if you need to or close them right away. And so we thought about this, like, what are the 80% really that you do every day in those tools?
Yeah.
And that sort of became the philosophy about Raycast. Like, can we do the 80% of the tools in one single tool, but much better, easier to reach, quicker? And then the other 20%, which you don't do that often, like, I don't know, creating a project in Jira or, iterating on a Notion page, we leave those in the tools. They're purpose-built. They do this much better than we could ever do. But for all the other stuff, we saw then like, oh, people like to have the Jira there. They're probably going to like GitHub there as well. Zoom for like creating quickly a call. And now we have over 2,000 of those extensions in the store.
Wow. Actually, I didn't realize you can, presumably you can create pull requests and
Oh, you can,
GitHub
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah, you can create pull requests. You can see your own pull requests. I think you can accept and merge them properly. We don't allow you to do a review because, again, that's where you would go to GitHub and do like a proper review there. But I use it, for example, to see like what's assigned to me. And then I see, okay, this is the stuff that I need to take care of. And then I can quickly go there. or we have a few different repositories, so I can quickly open a repository and go there and then check out what I need to do. But it's like saves me a bunch of clicks and potential distractions that I would have otherwise.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a dev tool, at some point, your customers are going to start asking you for enterprise features. WorkOS offers you single sign-on, skim provisioning, and audit logs out the box. WorkOS is trusted by Perplexity and Vercel, as well as Workbrew, a homebrew management startup that I recently interviewed. I just told Mike that WorkOS is the sponsor, and this is what Mike said.
Yeah, so WorkOS isn't paying me any money for this. I pay WorkOS money for this, but WorkOS is like one of the best developer tools I've like ever used. It's the documentation and the experience with building with them is so good. Like I initially was almost like, okay, this seems expensive, but then I built an integration with them in about 20 minutes that I had spent 2 days bang my head off the wall trying to build it directly with Okta. And then with WorkOS, I then have like many SSO providers like supported instead of just one. So yeah, like for me, WorkOS is one of the nicest developer experiences I've encountered in the last like 5 years, probably. And it's not surprising because a bunch of the developer team are ex-GitHub and therefore very good at their job.
Go to workos.com to learn more. This is an aside, so I don't know, we should go down this, but like, it's actually like probably like the biggest challenge of Raycast is like just even knowing how much stuff you can do. It's like I'm just constantly like, wait, I could just have done that.
Yeah.
Why have I wasted so much time not?
It's this funny thing whenever I meet somebody, it's like, hey, I use Raycast, but I feel like I don't use it enough. And it's like, well, what do you use? And then they oftentimes like give me a list of 5 to 10 things. It's like, look, this is probably more than you have in a bunch of other apps. You're using it much more than any other app on your Mac. Yeah. And it's just like constant learning curve. Even myself, like I still learn stuff you can do there. There's so many things out there. I recently picked up a few different new patterns we released this feature Hyperkey, which I wasn't a big user of before. And Hyperkey is like you can map one modifier key like caps lock to basically replicate a few modifier keys in one. So this allows you to have basically more keyboard shortcuts, to put it short. But you kind of need to set this up and get into the habit of it. But then somebody posted some really cool use cases of it, and so I picked those up, and so now they became muscle memory. But yeah, it's an endless learning curve for everybody.
Yeah. And I mean, especially anyway, we're gonna get to the AI stuff, so I'm gonna hold back. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about is kind of this very, very vacuous concept of quality.
Yeah.
But I do think, and hopefully a lot of people listening have used Raycast and kind of can back me up that this is not just like kissing up to you. Genuinely, I think Raycast, you open it, it opens really fast. It feels very nice. When you use, for instance, the Notes app, it feels satisfying to use it. It feels satisfying to make a bullet point. I don't know what it is. It's just, there's this, it feels well made. And I kind of wanted to ask you about like, how does that happen? Because I'm sure it doesn't, it's rare. So you must be doing some things right.
Quality is such a tricky thing, right? Because there's, on one way you can measure things like how often an app crashes, right? And that's good, right? But you can build something that never crashes but doesn't feel high quality at the same time. So it's not just that. For us, like quality, I think there are a few things. Like when I look around actually in the real world, when you have something high quality built, right? Usually when you touch that and you lift it up, it just feels a bit heavier. Yeah. It like feels very good designed, very solid, and you feel like you can't really break it. And so we try to take those feelings to software almost. And for us, it was very important. Like we want to make it really fast. And so there's a lot of like, kind of like tricks that we do in the app to make it really fast. Like we have a very intelligent caching layer. So it really like feels like everything is always available. And so that makes it like a really fast experience. We care a lot about design, which we also feel like ties into quality. Like I always say this, like, hey, our users are like 8, 10, 12 hours in front of their computers. The best we can do is like show them some nice pixels. but you also need to design it in a way that is highly functional, because we are this weird app that you basically want to spend as little time as possible in. So our design is quite minimal, but even that is sometimes challenging to do in a good way. But really, I think what it boils down to, like, we're building a product for ourselves. So when we put out a feature, like, it goes into internal, and then everybody like downloads internal builds, and they get automatically updated for the whole team every night at least, and sometimes during the day when somebody kicks it off. And so that means like everybody who is in Raycast using the features before they go out for like a couple of weeks. So when it goes out, the usual paper cuts that you would otherwise experience are all gone by that moment, or like at least most of them, because we have this feedback culture, like everything that pops up getting shared internally. And this can be like little things, like literally visual glitches, which like sort of is a meme internally that we don't ship glitches and hold off releases even if like we see something that happened a few times. But more importantly, also like a lot of like UX issues that we identify. Because when you use it, like as often as we use Raycast during the day ourselves, you like experience every little detail.
Yeah.
And so then we raise this and try to fix that. So like a feature when it drops in internal is usually very bare bones, and it goes through this like relatively quick loop of iterations to make it really rock solid. And so when we ship it, like we ship something that we feel like is really good. It's not always perfect, right? There is like bugs and like little things in there that we would like to improve. And you also need to say at some point that's enough. We also shipping every 2 weeks. We want to be extremely fast. So there's always a bit of a trade-off. But with this strong dog fooding internally, I think we can catch most of the stuff and then have those delightful experiences that you pick up yourself in notes and various other places inside of Raycast.
Yeah. And so you mentioned like you want to ship fast, but you also like don't put things out there unless they're ready. Would you say there's any, just because I think sometimes it's like quality is like, you know, there's the answer of like, you know, it's just great. Like we care a lot about it, like, which I know you do.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there's any like kind of, you know, non-obvious or like obvious costs to it where it's like, we're willing to take that cost because we care so much about quality.
Yeah.
Or like we're willing to sacrifice this because we care so much about quality or anything like that.
Yeah. Quality is interesting. If you ask any company, they all say they care about quality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's also even like when we thought about like what are the values of us and there was quality in the room, it's like, yeah, who doesn't have quality as a value, right? It's this really weird thing. So it's very hard to like make this like a deciding factor, but it's like also what everybody should think about, right? We say we want to build something high quality and therefore aim for this. What we oftentimes see working quite well is like we start with something broad, which is usually every feature, because a feature or a project is just an idea at the beginning, right? So we start with that. And then we go around that and like start working on it, usually relatively quick, because we like programmers, we want to get stuff done, right? And basically build something. And then throughout building, we get a lot of answers. And then when we feel like good enough, we oftentimes set ourselves sort of a deadline. And so we have this bi-weekly release schedule. And so we try to aim in every release, have like what we call a highlighted feature. And so we can look like, okay, we're now here. In 3 weeks, there's another release. We feel like we can make this. And so we say, like, let's aim to release in 3 weeks. And then I think you flip around the switch and you say, okay, when we release in 3 weeks, what are the important things we need to get done? And then you work towards this release. And then very typical, and we probably should map this out, is like you see when it gets closer to the release, you see like a lot of these small paper cuts getting fixed. Whereas before you build like the bigger feature and like trying to figure out. And then you also make decisions like, hey, look, we don't need this in the first version, let's ship it. And oftentimes when we ship something, it's a relatively simple first implementation. And simple oftentimes is hard to get right. But we know like there are probably a bunch of stuff that people will ask for. And so we put it out and see really what people will ask for. And then we try to follow up relatively quickly afterwards with a second iteration if possible, to address basically sort of the initial feedback. And so it's this fine line you want to like basically find where you want to build a good enough feature, but you also don't want to overbuild it in a way, and rather have a smaller scope, but then in a good quality, essentially. That's kind of how we.
And you're scoping you're trying not to kind of guess at what people want, and you're just building the thing that you're pretty sure, like, this is the core thing that needs it to be usable, and then listen to what.
Yeah, it's really that. Like, we often come back to the core thing, and then again, because we start using it, it's like, okay, like, we have missed that, let's put this in. This is what we thought is going to be this perfect thing. It's not really necessary day to day. And then you get this like really good opinion about a feature and feel quite good about it when you have it ready. And then oftentimes also, like, the features that go out there feel for us so normal at this point. When we ship it, it's like we're sometimes surprised, like, oh wow, people really love this feature.
Yeah.
But it's like we got so accustomed to it, right? When you work on something for like weeks, like, it's so normal to you. And this happened to me like a few times where I feel like, this is a much bigger release than I thought it will be. And then as I realized, hold on a second, I've been using it for like 6 weeks already. For me, it's already normal, right? So I don't have this novelty effect that people have when they experience it for the first time.
That's cool. So yeah, because you've tested it so much
at
that point. Yeah. And then one thing on like testing is like, how are you actually getting feedback, and then on terms of like new features, and then also how are you kind of evaluating if this was a good feature?
You mean externally when we shipped it, basically, right? Yeah. So feedback, we basically, from day one, we had this send feedback command in Raycast, which we say during onboarding, like, send us feedback, and we reply to literally everything. So if you type send feedback in Raycast, you get a little text box, and you can just send us anything you want, and we will read it. And so this obviously got a lot more challenging nowadays, but sort of how it started was, how it really started, like back in YC, we did onboarding calls with users, and then we wanted to see how they're using it. A ton of stuff didn't work. We were fixing it, gave them the new version next time. And so we did that a few times and feel like, this is super valuable, but it doesn't scale up. And so what's the next best thing? Okay, we let them send us everything they have as easy as possible and answering everything we get. And so we did that. In the early days, it oftentimes meant like they send us a bug report. And because we were reading it, it's like we were fixing it. And 30 minutes later said like, hey, it's fixed, gonna be out tomorrow.
Wow.
And like really building this rapid loop. And I think it adds a lot of loyalty, because like, how often have you sent somewhere feedback and never heard back?
Yeah.
It happens all the time, right? And so we wanted to be better than that. And so the next evolution was like when we had a big volume, like we still replying to everything, but the sort of middle step we had probably 2 years in the company, what we did is we still wanted that everybody can observe what happens, but like not everybody needs to reply. And so we had sort of this on-call where a few people would reply, but every feedback from every day was like basically the next morning posted into Slack, so everybody can read through the feedback. And the good thing about that is like when you're an engineer and you worked on one feature and you see constant feedback coming in about that feature, you see what's broken and what works or what needs to be improved. And then we're picking those things up individually, where basically people say, hey, that's my feature, I own this, I make snippets now better, people wanted to have this feature. And then they were hacking it in, and then we were building it and shipping it again. And so we had that. And so now we have like a support team taking care of that, basically. And basically try to do the same thing with just higher volume. But yeah, like we really try to close the loop. And it comes down to how can you basically get like the signal to the person who builds it, so they know what is broken, what needs to be improved, what people want, what they're missing. I think that's really where feedback boils down to. How can you make this loop as efficient as possible?
So there's no barriers. There's no like middle manager who's like gatekeeping the feedback.
Yeah, not really. It gets challenging with the volume we have right now. Like something which we're trying to figure out how we deal with all of that, because it can be quite overwhelming.
It's like hundreds a day.
Yeah, like it's literally like that. So it's quite a lot. So we haven't fully figured out at the scale yet. But it's something which is so embodied in our DNA that we want to hear. Yeah. And we also be honest, like when we don't do something, we also respond like, hey, look, we're not doing this, or like, hey, something we're working on should come out in a few weeks. Like we also try to be very transparent. When you ask us, like, if we work on that feature, we'll probably say in some cheeky tone, yes or no.
Okay, okay. So they should send they should send feedback, but
Yes.
it may or may not. They'll get an answer whether or not it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people guess in the right direction, I try to give them some hints.
Yeah.
And when they're like, say, something that we will not do, then we do this as well. Or also when we oftentimes get feedbacks about, hey, I wish this would work like this in the app. And then we explain like, yeah, this is a good idea, but there are some constraints and this is the reason why it is like it is. And then oftentimes, because we talk from developer to developer, oftentimes with our user base, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for explaining. So we taking time for that as well.
And I guess for most things, they could build an extension as well.
That's the beauty about Raycast now. Like a lot of the stuff is like, hey, look, if you want to have it differently, there you go. You can build your own extensions. And that's what a lot of people do. Like not everything ends up in the store. Some people have extensions for themselves, which are so special, like, and so unique to their setup, how they work, that they never publish it, which is totally fine by us, which is actually quite cool, I feel like, when you have something that is just yours.
Yeah. You're special.
Yes.
You're special. Something else I wanted to talk about was like, we were talking about this before, like, I think in DevTools, in developers, like, obviously, you know, can be skeptical, don't like promotion, typically, is like the stereotype. But at the same time, I think when people like something, they can become like just like so big on promoting it. And I have seen that a lot with Raycast. Like I found myself doing it. And I've seen a lot of others doing it where it's like, you should just, I think I was saying to our editor, like, like he should try it out. Is there something like you think about? Like, does just,
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So I think like there are a few things that I would highlight. There's one, you're right, like typical developers don't want to get sold stuff, right? They want to discover. We always coming back, it's like, look, what are we interested in? And like, we probably are a good representation of the people we want to reach. And so let's do something that we would genuinely like. And then also make a lot of those decisions. Like early on, we decided we're not requiring a login. And for a VC-backed company like us, like, and our investors still probably doesn't like that, but like we don't have a login, right? And why are we doing this? Because we don't need it. Like if we don't need a login for the functionality of the app, why should we have one? And like that sits very well with developers because they come and they just want to play around with the tool. They don't want to create an account. They just want to get in there, right? And so that was a deliberate decision. Analytics, like we have anonymized analytics, so I can't tell if you used the app. I only know somebody used the app today. Again, there's something which
quite
like
glad about that, to be honest, because I've probably done some dumb stuff. Like, you know,
fair enough. But it's like, it's again like something where we feel like, privacy matters to us. And it's again something that developers care about a lot because we know we're developers ourselves. And there is no need from a business standpoint that I know who this person is, why they're doing X, Y, Z. Like we want to basically know, is the product getting used or not used? How can we improve it? That's the answers we want to answer essentially, right? And so we always try to like come there with like our opinion and not like with like the best practices or the cargo code or like what's there. And so that was early decisions. And then further down, we basically grow through word of mouth. We feel like we want to build a product that speaks for itself and then people will fall in love with and advocate for that. And we tried things like paid marketing at some point and we feel like it doesn't really fit our brand. It doesn't really move the needle as well, to be honest. And then we're leaning more and more into this. And then now we're thinking about really how can you make this a lifestyle is sometimes what we take, right? Because it's oftentimes like, there is the software, sure, but then it's much more than that, right? There's people behind building that. Our users really love the tool and they can't work on their Mac without it anymore. So we started doing like in real life events like meetups and hackathons to get people together. And there's always great dynamics. Like it's a mix of like we literally, as we did earlier, I show you what we built very openly. This is the like kind of stuff we're tinkering around with. We're sitting there like an hour long doing Q&A and answering every question you ask us and like try to be really open. And I think this resonates with people because it's a bit different than others, and we try to like basically building like a really momentum and brand around that. Brand is really what we're thinking about a lot, is like, what is the brand that we put there? How do people discover us? And basically making like software more than like what we have in our computers, but something really that you say like, hey, I'm a Raycast user. Basically, you're identifying yourself as a Raycast user almost.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear what, like we talk about lifestyle. If like Nike is probably like, I guess like athlete, they talk a lot about like impossible, there's nothing, like you're a winner, you're like competitive, active. For me, like maybe I'll say like what I think.
I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, and then I want to hear the actual answer, and don't be dictated by what I say. You can say that it's different. I feel like it's like, you care about, like, I don't know how much I'm led here, but it is like that productivity about like not wasting time. I think design, but not like, I think design and then, tech, but not like, it doesn't feel like the kind of like neck beard kind of tech, like, in a sense, like it's more like, it's easy to use without necessarily like digging into like every little under the hood. I don't know. That's kind of how I'm.
Yeah. So how we think about it, I mean, when you think about brands, like I think there's stuff like teenage engineering, right? It's like this sort of dream music stuff, and they do like other equipment that people really fall in love to because there's so much, like they put so much care into like how they're putting it together. So that's sort of inspirations. But then really, I think like when I think about productivity, people think about it as something to measure. For me, it's much more like a feeling. Like I can leave a day and feel super good because I got a ton of stuff done. And that makes like a great day, not just a great working day. You go home and have fun with your family and friends and you feel much better. And so that's really what we want to get to. Like, how can you get this feeling? And we all had it, right? Like we went into the weekend, felt like this was a great week, or like we wrapped up the week, right? And how can we basically get people having that feeling more often? That's kind of like where we're coming from. The closest that we've seen is like, which also kind of sticks, is like sort of the flow state. Like that's sort of, when you think about how do you get to this feeling, it's oftentimes you're really doing concentrated work, challenging work, and you feel like you accomplished something. And so that's sort of kind of like a bit how we're trying to put it together. The tricky part is, I'm not going to lie, is like with Raycast, you mentioned yourself, you can do a billion things. And so how do you put that all under a good umbrella that people understand? Where we often are struggling still is like to describe what Raycast is in a simple way. Like it's sometimes easier with like a tool that does one thing and you get an extreme value out of this one thing. Raycast is the extreme opposite. You do 1,000 things with little value, and then overall it may be the same amount of value, but you have the 1,000 things, right? And so that's a bit of a slippery slope. But we're thinking a lot about how do we get people feeling more often happy about their accomplishments.
But I guess that's like thinking about like Nike, like why, like what is the value that Nike brings? It's like, it's kind of hard to say.
It's kind of hard to say, yeah. You may be running faster, but do you run faster because of the gear or because of how you feel? Because you feel more motivated. You feel, oh, I finally got those Nike shoes that I wanted to have for a year. And then you put in more effort. Like, I don't know, like it's very interesting, but I feel like there's a lot about how software makes you feel. And this can have like quite a big impact, I think, on your day to day.
Yeah. I think so. I do, like, kind of going on about the notes, but like, I think when you feel good, like as you type it and you feel like I'm doing something productive, it's almost like there's value in that.
Yeah. It feels fulfilling.
Yeah.
It feels like, because like there are products that basically enable you to do stuff. And then that's kind of like, we're not the end goal, right? Like you're not using, like you use a hammer to build something, right? But we also like a tool, right? You use Raycast to do something else. Like you want to build like a great podcast. Some people want to be productive in their massive corporate environment. some other just getting started with their startup and they want to get something out of this. So we see ourselves almost like as an enabler, right? Like we, not the end result, like we help you getting somewhere there. And so it's really like a tool at the end of the day. And with every tool, you need to learn how to use it. And the more you learn, the more you get out of it, right? There are probably people that can operate a hammer better than me. And they're getting more out of it, right? Because they're putting more effort into it.
Yeah. True. Okay, I want to, we're kind of actually coming towards the end, actually. So I want to talk about AI, but before we get into AI, listeners, it is actually cool. It's not just like AI hype. We were playing around with it today. And just to give you one example, you were showing me some stuff and I was like, oh, like, could you just generate like an image and then set that as your background, just like with Raycast without doing anything? And spoiler alert, you can. And it's just, it's almost like ChatGPT kind of experience, but like it has full access to your computer. So it can do pretty much anything for you. And it actually feels like a really exciting experience where it's like, you could just say what you want to happen on your computer, and there's a good chance that Raycast can do it for you.
That's kind of where we're heading towards, I think, generally. So zooming like out a bit, right? So I use computers for many years now, but I feel like in a grand scheme of things, like operating system hasn't really changed. It like looks a bit more modern, gets a bit vibrancy and blur here, but it's still like the same thing, right? I click icons, I do this, I do that. And so really, when you think about it, like in your head, the steps you go through is like you want to accomplish like a thing, and then you translate it into like, how do I do that on my computer? And you going a level deeper, you're translating it into mouse clicks and key presses, right? To really like go that level down. But like, why not saying to the computer what you want to do and let the computer do the work for you, right? Like that's the kind of point of a computer. And so like we kind of like getting there, I think, slowly but surely. And the pleasure that we have, we feel like operating systems that's like so stagnant, and we probably the closest of an application that is to an operating system because it sits there and like has access to everything. And so could we be that layer, this productivity, this AI meta layer that sits on your operating system and enables you to do those kind of stuff? And so with the extensions that we have, and with the access to the file system and other things on your computer, like we kind of having that now. It's still like we have it in beta right now. It's like when we did the stuff earlier with the wallpapers, like, does this work? It does work. It's sometimes a hit or miss, I'm not gonna lie. But when it works, it's like truly magical. Like you do this and feel like, oh my God, that is the future. And then over time it will work more often. And at some point it's just the norm how you use a computer, I think. It's not for everything. I was going to say that because there is some stuff which you want to have, which you do and need the accuracy, and it's a different kind of work. But there's a lot of this kind of stuff that, I want to do some research, I take it off, and then it maybe saves the research directly into my Notion page. Or like this more free and open-ended things I want to do. And it's really different when you chat to something, and then also when you bring in potentially voice. It really changes how you operate suddenly with something. And I think those new modalities and user experiences going to really change how we're going to use our desktop and mobile computers.
It's I think it seems like it's what Apple Intelligence should have been, or like, I mean, I guess it's still not out yet, right? But
no,
that's I think what it is, which is crazy exciting, and I hadn't really realized that until you showed me today.
And I think the standard we always take is like we want to be for professionals, like the developers, the designers, the people that really do work on their computers. And I think like you kind of need to think a bit differently there. Like they're working with tools like in the terminals. They have professional tools like Figma. They like using things like Notion and Linear. So how do you connect those things intelligently with each other together? And that's sort of where we want to take Raycast. That it becomes smarter and like maybe it becomes proactive and does things for you at some point. And you wake up and it's like, oh, there is my there's my work. Or like you get creators like, hey, look, those were the pull requests that you need to review. Here's like
I've
how
made
you
a
can
start.
proceed. Yeah, I made a start. Like this is probably the one you want to start with. This is ready to merge. I think there's an
This one
exciting
was so
future.
bad that I've scheduled a meeting with with the developer.
Exactly.
So you can give the feedback in person.
Here's a Zoom call. Go ahead.
Let them say it nicely. I've kind of keep speaking about this one thing, but it's just like, someone I know is user researcher, and they don't have this tool anymore that was for like anonymizing videos.
Yeah.
And the way they did that was like basically blurring out, changing the voice. So I told them about FFmpeg. They now have a bash script.
Yeah.
And they've become the go-to person. And then every time someone needs a video like anonymized or a ton of videos anonymized, they go to them, but there's sometimes like different changes. So they have to use ChatGPT to like change it to be like, okay, actually like low pitch on this one, high pitch on the thing. And I was just imagining like this world where Raycast, you can be like, okay, every file in this folder, anonymize it. And like Raycast goes and like has FFmpeg and does this stuff. Like it's just, and it seems like from what you showed me, it doesn't seem like that's actually that far away from being possible. Or maybe it already is.
I think like we will get there for sure. And also probably very quickly. I think the thing is like, you have some knowledge, right? How can you translate this knowledge so that other people around you, probably in your company, can benefit? Because it's like, if you have a problem that you solve, there is a very high likelihood that the person next to you has the same problem, right? So how can you share all this kind of stuff? And kind of like going back full circle, as we started with like, traditionally, there was probably one engineer who wrote like a bash script for that. And then they shared this bash script. But then the next person wanted to edit it and didn't know bash, or like maybe they did and improved it. But now you can do those things with natural language, like, and more people can do this. But I think like really sharing those things with each other is really what's cool about it. Like when you have those, these are all mini tools, right? But that's oftentimes what we need for our job. Not everything is like a massive thing. You kind of need these little things to make you more productive, to automate a bunch of stuff, to improve your workflows. And so how can you do those little isolated things super easy, shareable, make it like instantaneously, so it's very easy to do. And I think that's like pretty exciting when you have all those little things doing maybe things automatically for you or on your fingertips. You can just say like, oh yeah, I want to blur out this video, and also make it silent or make it a high pitch voice. Yeah,
it's extremely cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're coming very close to the end. But,
yes.
Okay. Let's just do some fun stuff on Raycast. Like
stuff on Raycast.
What are some crazy things that people have been doing with Raycast?
Yeah, crazy things. Internally, Mathieu made it render Doom, which was crazy as an extension. So that's a classic one. I think generally when you build an API that people can build their own things with, like you have certain ideas what you want to enable, and then you're very much surprised what people will build with it. Just like I would probably not have imagined that we would have that many extensions by now. It's just like, yeah, it's crazy how many people build this. And everybody gets different value out of it. But yeah, I think it's always surprising. Yeah, I think that's one of the ones that I always find good.
Okay, amazing. I thought the YouTube download is quite interesting because I use YT DLP, but it's like, it seems like super easy to download YouTube videos.
Yeah, developers get creative, right? So you can scrape things, you can do anything you really want with Raycast. And so I think that's I love about working on developer tools. Like people get creative and hack stuff, and then those hacks are super useful, which is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and one very last thing.
Yeah.
You just started doing terminal coffee, right?
Yes.
Wait, what's the 1 minute story of what happened?
Oh,
there?
the 1 minute story. I feel like everybody who joins Raycast is either a coffee lover, a photographer, or probably a cyclist. Those are the three most common hobbies. And coffee, for whatever reason, the number one. And so we have like a coffee channel in Slack where people nerd out about the best brews and whatever. And so then at some point we started like, let's make a coffee. And then Petro got in touch with David from Terminal because David was in one of our meetups, and then one thing led to another, and basically did a coffee. And so now you can in Raycast actually fully order your coffee. Like, I did this recently and sent my parents a package of coffee.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool actually. So you don't need to go anywhere. You just open Raycast and put all the stuff in there, and then it goes out.
Okay.
It's crazy.
That's amazing. That's amazing.